This program is provided by Universal Genesis.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're using the incredible sources you send into to forge a completely new map of Western philosophy.
It's a revolutionary way of looking at it, really.
It is. I mean, forget the standard timeline you learned in college.
Yeah.
We're going straight for the intellectual bedrock, and honestly, the findings are pretty astonishing.
Our goal today is to lay out this hidden structure, this hidden identity connecting someone like Hegel all the way back to early theological frameworks.
Right.
Specifically, we want to show you that these really complex, sometimes, impenetrable systems of modern philosophy, they aren't brand new creations.
They're not. They're actually direct descendants of structures that were laid down centuries and centuries ago by Augustine.
Exactly.
And the really shocking claim at the center of this whole deep dive, the one your sources just make impossible to ignore, is that the main artery of Western philosophy isn't, Greek thought.
Not at all. It's a long, continuous river of thinking that starts almost entirely with Augustine.
And we're not just talking about some vague influence here.
No, this is much deeper. We are talking about structural identity. The core insight here is that Hegel's entire philosophical system, his huge 3-part encyclopedia, is basically, well, it's an updated version of Augustine's City of God.
A philosophical version.
A purely philosophical rendering, yes. It uses that ancient Neoplatonic architecture of unity, then externalization, and then a final return. But it just swaps out the religious terms for philosophical concepts.
And this is the ultimate shortcut for you, the listener. Once you have this map, everything just clicks into place. You see the purpose, the energy behind centuries of thought.
And it's a connection that, as the material shows, is so fundamental that it's often just missed or maybe glossed over by academics today.
Okay, let's get into it. Let's unpack this structural blueprint.
All right, so if we just lay the systems side by side, the structure it's an astonishing match. All 3 of them, Augustine's theology, Hegel's philosophy, and that Neoplatonic flow underneath, they all describe the universe through this 3-stage drama.
A drama of creation, fall, and then self-recovery. So let's start with stage 1, the principle of original perfection. This is the inner world, right, before time and division.
That's it. For Augustine, this is the heavenly city, the civitas Dei. It's this eternal realm where God's reason and his will exist in perfect harmony.
And the sources really emphasize this is God's inner life before creation even happens.
Yes, that's crucial. And Hegel takes that exact idea of an inner life and just translates it. For him, it becomes his logic.
Which he called the country of pure concepts.
Famously, yes. It's this harmonious, contradiction-free world of ideas that exists before the actual messy world comes into being.
And the root of this whole structure
Goes back to Neoplatonism. They called this stage the one, or the nous. Pure intellect, perfect unity.
So whether it's the one, the heavenly city, or logic,
Yeah.
the takeaway is this state of pure internal pre-creation harmony.
Exactly.
But of course, the story can't stay there. That brings us to stage 2, externalization and decline, the fall.
Right. For Augustine, this is the earthly city, the civitas terrena. It's the world of division, of corruption and confusion.
Where God's perfect order gets externalized and sort of messed up by it.
It appears imperfectly, yes. It leaves that inner sanctity and enters the messy, real world.
So how does Hegel rephrase that moment of loss and messiness?
For Hegel, this is the philosophy of nature. The concept, which was perfect in the logic, now has to alienate itself. It has to split into matter, time, life.
A world of contradiction.
And estrangement. The natural world, for Hegel, is literally the divine concept that has become lost to itself.
That idea of the concept alienating itself can feel a little abstract.
Yeah.
What does that mean for us, for humanity on this map?
It's the feeling of confusion. It's war. It's the distance between the pure idea and how it actually shows up in the world. It's what stops us from seeing the divine order in everything immediately. And it maps perfectly onto the Neoplatonic idea of the descent of the world's soul, moving down toward matter and separation. The key point of stage 2 is this fundamental breaking of that original unity.
Which is necessary for the next part to happen.
Exactly. It sets up stage 3, return and harmony, completion.
We have to complete the circle, get back to perfection, but this time, with the experience of the world under our belt.
And for Augustine, this is the realization of the kingdom of God throughout history. It's this long, slow process where the earthly city is purified and brought back to its divine purpose.
So church history, salvation history, it all adds up to God's self-realization over time.
Yes. And this is where Hegel just makes it so clear. He calls this final stage the philosophy of spirit, which culminates in what he calls the absolute spirit.
And this is the movement where spirito, human consciousness history, finally achieves self-recognition by passing through and overcoming that alienated natural world.
It's exactly what he meant when he said his whole project was the process by which God knows himself. He's just translating Augustine's salvation history into a philosophical movement.
Which in Neoplatonism is the ascent, the epistrophe.
The return of the soul to the one. The core narrative is identical across all three. It is the drama of the highest thing returning to itself.
Okay, the structural identity it's undeniable. Unity, then an outer split, and then a self-recovery through history. So why? Why have we been taught that modern philosophy starts with Descartes and the Age of Reason? Why do we ignore this Augustinian flow?
Well, because accepting this map requires two pretty big and I think uncomfortable reorganizations of how we understand history.
Okay.
First, we have to admit that modern philosophy is not really the Age of Reason that kicks off with Descartes. He's actually kind of secondary, maybe even a tangent to the main story.
Oh, okay, that's a huge claim.
Yeah.
If Descartes is tangential, what's the main current? Where's the real energy coming from?
The main current is a history of overthrow. It's this constant internal power struggle between theology and philosophy. You can trace it clearly from Thomas Aquinas through Martin Luther, then to Kant, and finally it climaxes with Hegel.
So the real engine was reforming theology for a new world, not just pure reason out of nowhere.
Exactly. And that leads to the second reorganization. We have to recognize that the dominant axis of that whole struggle is Augustinianism.
Right.
The river runs from Augustine. It briefly passes through Thomas Aquinas, who was only dominant for, political and academic reasons for a time. And then it flows straight into the modern Augustinian revival.
And that's Luther, the Reformation. It shifted the focus back to Augustine's idea of the inner life, personal faith, away from the external institutional church.
Precisely. Luther was a thorough Augustinian. He emphasized man's impotence without grace, the primacy of that inner experience. And then that spiritual turn gets translated by Kant. Kant philosophicalizes the Augustinian inner law. He turns it into the ethical law we discover inside ourselves. And he turns the transcendence of God into the unknowable thing in itself.
He's preserving the structure, the inner and the outer, the known and the unknown.
He's setting the stage, which perfectly sets up Hegel to come in and finish the job. He doesn't invent a new building, he just completes the translation.
Turning God's kingdom into historical development and the logos into his concept, the Begriff.
And the conclusion from all this is, it's kind of mind-blowing. Philosophy and theology in the West aren't separate fields. They're not even in opposition. They're two sides of the same tree, and that tree is rooted in Augustine.
Wow. And that brings us to the really revolutionary insight about science, the standard story Greece, then a medieval dark age, then Descartes.
Yeah.
Your material calls that just a chronology, a surface story.
It is. The real intellectual artery, the one that gives everything its direction, is Augustine, through Islam, through scholasticism, through the Reformation, and into modern philosophy.
Which means the Greeks were just raw materials.
They were just the ingredients, the toolbox. Thinkers for centuries used Greek ideas to build solutions to their own fundamentally theological problems.
So the driving purpose was always the theological logos, the historical unfolding of the kingdom of God. That's a totally different project from what the original Greeks were doing.
Completely different. They were focused on natural philosophy, logic, mathematical cosmology. And this clarifies who the true heirs of Greece actually are.
Which is?
It's science. The original Greek mainstream, that Aristotelian focus on observation, causality, mathematization, that was inherited by Galileo, by Kepler, by Newton. Science is the legitimate successor to Aristotelian natural philosophy.
So the great split in the modern era wasn't really faith versus reason. It was the moment the Augustinian philosophical current with Hegel and the Aristotelian scientific current with Newton they went their separate ways.
That's the split. And what the wild is that these deep structural patterns, they just keep repeating. Because the Augustinian blueprint is still the engine. You can see it when you compare key figures.
I love this part. It's like historical symmetry. The sources say Thomas Aquinas is the structural equivalent of Kant. Break that down for us.
They were both reconstructors of divine order. They showed up at times of great intellectual conflict, and their job was to draw clear, stable boundaries between faith and reason to calm things down.
Okay.
Thomas did it for the medieval Catholic world, using the new Aristotle translations. Kant did the exact same thing for the modern Protestant world, defining the limits of pure reason to make a safe space for faith and morality. They were boundary setters.
That makes perfect sense. And then you have Jan Hus corresponding to Fichte.
Both were precursors to huge revolutions. They were the radical purists. Hus, with his emphasis on purity, set the stage for the Reformation. Fichte, with his radical idealism, paved the way for Hegel. They were the ones who cleared the ground for the next big thing.
And the final pair, Luther equals Hegel.
The completers of the Great Reform. Luther took the Augustinian principle of inner life, and he rebuilt it as a religious structure for the whole world. Hegel took that exact same inner structure, that unity split return, and rebuilt it as a total system for all of intellectual history.
The repetition is the proof.
It proves that Western philosophy just evolved as a different form of religious thought. It's constantly replaying that Augustinian pattern.
Okay, let's zoom in now on the most detailed parallel, the one that really, for me, closes the loop. We know Hegel's Encyclopedia is Augustine's City of God 2.0, but what about the origin story? How did Hegel translate the Garden of Eden?
You're right to focus on that. It's the key. Hegel's logic is structurally equivalent to the Platonic idea world, to Augustine's heavenly city, and yes, implicitly, to the Genesis Garden of Eden.
That's the part I want to dig into. Is there evidence that Hegel knew he was doing this? That he saw the logic as a kind of theological origin story?
The evidence is totally explicit. Hegel himself said that the logic describes the movement God undertook within himself before the creation of the world.
So he places it outside of time.
Outside of time and contradiction, it's the pure theoretical realm of the concept, where God's ideas are in perfect, unfallen harmony. It is the Edenic state, philosophically described.
So if you map it onto the Judeo-Christian narrative, it's a perfect fit.
A one-to-one match. The Garden of Eden, this pre-fall state, no death, no conflict, is Hegel's logic. The realm of the pure concept, perfect self-agreement.
Then the fall. Original sin. The introduction of nature and conflict.
Is Hegel's philosophy of nature, the concept externalizing itself, that necessary moment of self-loss and division in the material world.
And finally, salvation history, the kingdom of God.
Is Hegel's philosophy of spirit, where spirit recovers itself to the long, often painful path of human history, finally achieving total self-knowledge in the absolute spirit.
So he literally translated Genesis.
He completely translated Genesis into a philosophical trilogy. He used modern philosophical concepts to replace the religious terms, but he kept the original theological meaning perfectly intact.
So let's bring this home. What does this all mean for you, the listener, sitting here right now?
It means you now have the real map, the true map of Western intellectual history. It's one long, continuous Augustinian river that used Greek texts as tools.
A river that culminates in Hegel's theological philosophy, while the true heir of the Greek scientific mindset is, well, modern science.
And having this map it's a game changer. It instantly connects why these major figures did what they did. You understand why Descartes is a side story, why Kant was so obsessed with drawing boundaries for reason, and where science actually came from.
You stop just memorizing a timeline of names.
You start seeing the underlying drama.
So here's the final provocative thought that this deep dive leaves us with. The deepest structural truth of all Western thought is that its entire history is just one long story. It's the millennia-spanning story of theology trying to find its most perfect, its most universal, its most philosophical form.
And that is the structural continuity that our university system, with its separate departments, often prevents us from seeing. But now you have the key.
This program is provided by Universal Genesis.